So, June 30th, 2025 marked a historic milestone for Canada, when it officially shipped its first LNG cargo to Asia, ending more than 3 decades of total dependence on pipelines through the United States. Previously, Canada had to pump 8.8 billion cubic feet of gas into its neighboring brother each day, bringing in an estimated $8 billion in 2024 alone. Yet all under the tight grip of Trump's tariffs, a move fraught with risk and capable of inflicting long-term damage on the national economy. Never before have viewers witnessed such a bold energy cut. The economic and trade tensions between the US and Canada have been escalating with no end in sight. Even after both sides agreed to delay tariffs for 30 days, Washington had already imposed a series of preemptive strike tariffs to tighten the screws on virtually all imports from its northern neighbor. As of March 4, 2025, the Trump administration slapped a 25% tariff on most Canadian exports to the United States, while designating energy products including natural gas for a 10% rate. Widespread alarm rippled through Canada's oil and gas sector when its domestic market, which accounted for nearly 100% of its exported gas, suddenly became far less competitive. To give you a clear picture, LNG, liquefied natural gas, is natural gas chilled to minus 165 degrees Celsius and converted into liquid form, reducing its volume by more than 600 times, which makes it easy to ship by tanker to regions without pipeline access. LNG is not only a cleaner energy source compared to coal or oil, but also a crucial feedstock for power generation, chemical production, and heating. With global consumption on the rise, especially in Asia, LNG has become a strategic commodity that determines both economic standing and energy security for nations. The US 10% tariff made Canada more vulnerable than ever, given that until then, some 8.8 billion cubic feet of gas per day had flowed across the border, generating a hefty $8 billion in revenue in 2024 alone. Even a tariff smaller than 25% was enough to send US sale prices soaring. While domestic American producers enjoyed the Henry Hub benchmark at an average of $3.74 per million British thermal units, that was over 5 times Canada's AEO index of about 71 cents per million British thermal units. When the base price was already high and then hit with import duty, LNG Canada lost its price advantage, pushing many mid- and long-term contracts into jeopardy. The ripple effect was a supply chain suddenly thrown onto a high-stakes gamble. American buyers who were used to cheap and reliable Canadian gas had to rethink their strategy. They could either accept more expensive US LNG or turn to Europe and Asia, where shipping costs are higher and transit times are longer. Meanwhile, customers in Asia, especially China, Japan, and South Korea, sat up and took notice when Canada shipped its first LNG cargo to Asia on June 30, 2025, opening a new supply channel that bypassed US tariffs altogether. This is precisely why the $40 billion Canadian LNG Canada project has never been more critical to Canada's ambition to diversify its markets and mitigate tariff risk. Beyond losing its competitive edge, Canada also faced the burden of high operating and infrastructure costs in northern British Columbia, which are far steeper than comparable U.S. projects along the Gulf of Mexico. Stricter environmental regulations and elevated borrowing costs ballooned the project's capital requirements, forcing partners Shell, Petronas, ProChina, Mitsubishi and Kogas to consider doubling capacity only if they secured long-term offtake commitments from Asian and European buyers. In short, Trump's tariff blow did more than undermine Canada's easy gains in the U.S. market. It forced Ottawa to urgently seek a maritime route to Asia. So, with low base prices, massive scale, and tariff pressure, we've got this dramatic narrative where LG market leverage could either become Canada's safety valve or, honestly, sink it under crushing costs and risk. Do you think Mark Carney will succeed in this comeback energy race? After the tariff crisis with the United States forced Canada to really search for a new way out, the LNG Canada project, well, it emerged as a strategic ray of light. A $40 billion joint venture between Shell, Petronas, PetroChina, Mitsubishi, and Kogas decided to build a super project at Kitimat Port in British Columbia, designed to turn Montana shale gas into LNG for convenient maritime export. Overcoming countless challenges of rugged terrain and ballooning costs, the project managed to complete the 670-kilometer coastal gas link pipeline, connecting the Dawson Creek region to the west coast and opening the path for gas to flow directly to the liquefaction plant. And, crucially, thanks to its direct Pacific access, LNG Canada can shorten the voyage to Japan, South Korea, or China from about 20 days if routed through the Panama Canal to just 10 days, while also avoiding the risks of traditional shipping lanes. Moreover, this project scores high on ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. To ensure sustainable development, the joint venture has signed over $5.88 billion Canadian dollars in contracts with local businesses and the Haisla indigenous community, while creating employment for more than 50,000 Canadian workers over 7 years of construction. Not only does it purchase equipment locally, but Haisla contractors have also been granted equity stakes in the Coastal GasLink project, enabling the community both to preserve its culture and to share directly in the colossal revenue stream. On the technology side, the Kitimat facility uses 2 liquefaction trains with a combined capacity of 14 million tons per year. That's enough to meet surging demand in Asia and Europe. Equipment supplied by JGC Japan and Fluor USA, powered by British Columbia's clean hydroelectricity, helps minimize CO2 emissions, making LNG Canada one of the lowest carbon footprint LNG exporters in the world. However, no success is without its challenges. Construction and operating costs in northern British Columbia's freezing climate are far higher than projects along the U.S. Gulf Coast, while stringent environmental regulations forced the joint venture to invest in additional emissions controls and biodiversity protection. That is why the provincial government has offered carbon tax and sales tax incentives to lighten the investor's burden. But these incentives have also sparked public concern over corporate social responsibility and community benefit. The journey from the dream of market diversification to reality has only just begun. But the departure of that first cargo from Cometport confirmed that Canada is no longer boxed in by United States pipeline exports. Instead, it has boldly spread its wings toward China, Japan, and South Korea, nations eager for clean, competitively priced energy with rapid delivery. This is not merely Trump's tariff revenge rebounding. It is the turning point that transforms Canada into a formidable player on the global energy map. Amid a global energy crisis and mounting sanctions on Russian gas, Asia is racing to secure clean and geopolitically neutral LNG, and this presents a golden opportunity for Canada. Japan, South Korea, and China have all announced plans to phase out Russian gas and traditional coal imports in favor of LNG sources with high reliability and minimal geopolitical exposure. Japan, with over 80% of its power generation dependent on imported gas, has committed to adding at least 20 million tons of LNG per year starting in 2026. South Korea has proposed expanding its LNG storage capacity by 50% in the next decade, and China has swiftly inked a series of long-term contracts to guarantee stable supplies ahead of next winter. It was against this white-hot backdrop that Canada's first LNG cargo from K-T set sail on June 30, 2025. The Gaslog Glasgow departed loaded with 2.66 million tons of premium LNG bound for Asia, inaugurating a new energy corridor that bypasses both pipelines and the risk-laden Panama Canal by cutting transit time from about 20 days down to just 10 days. Each voyage saves tens of millions of US dollars in shipping costs. Starting in 2026, LNG Canada plans to operate over 170 voyages annually to ports in Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, setting a record pace for Canada's gas exports. This milestone is more than just a commercial success. It's a bold declaration that Canada has sidestepped U.S. tariff pressure and broken free from its pipeline monopoly. Asia's shift toward clean and neutral LNG has unleashed enormous demand, propelling LNG Canada to its initial capacity of 14 million tons per year and sparking ambitions for a second phase. Partners Shell, Petronas, ProChina, Mitsubishi, and Kogus are weighing a capacity doubling to 28 million tons annually, aiming to place Canada among the top 5 global LNG exporters. Reuters reports that a final investment decision on Phase 2 is expected just before Phase 1 reaches full output so as to capitalize on Asia's market momentum. This new market not only generates revenue, but also dramatically reduces Canada's geopolitical risk. Previously, nearly 100% of Canada's natural gas, some 8.6 billion cubic feet per day, flowed through the U.S. pipelines. When Washington imposed a 10% import tariff on Canadian gas, U.S. sale prices spiked, and, well, many contracts stalled. Now, with over 170 direct voyages to Asia each year, Canada is no longer hostage to pipelines or tariffs, and earns top marks from Eastern buyers for stability and competitive pricing. Still, challenges remain. Expanding to 28 million tons requires tens of billions in new capital, alongside environmental regulations and, those high northern British Columbia construction costs. Yet, thanks to provincial incentives on carbon and sales taxes, coupled with indigenous partnership commitments to the Haisla community, Canada's path to conquer Asia's LNG market is widening. As LNG Canada vessels continue arriving in Yokohama, Busan, and Singapore, the question is not only can Canada sustain this growth, but also will this strategic pivot wake Washington up, or will it ignite a fresh round of United States-Canada tariff warfare? In conclusion, Canada's decision to cut the cord with the United States and pivot to Asia is far more than a single LNG shipment. It marks a pivotal step in the Maple Leaf Nation's journey toward energy independence. By freeing itself from pipelines and tariff pressures, Canada has charted a new course that expands its geopolitical influence and cements its role on the global energy map. However, the story is far from over. Phase 2 of the project, ambitiously targeting 28 million tons per year, will be the ultimate test. Can Canada maintain momentum against established giants like Qatar, the United States, and Australia? Massive capital costs, strict environmental standards, and carbon taxation loom as formidable hurdles. What do you think of this bold move? Will Canada lead the global LNG game, or will it get swept up in fierce competition? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next developments.